Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is probably going to be an epic video just from the subject matter alone. There's an epic gaff from JoJo Magoo on nuclear weapons. Just you know, one of his worst. Britney Spears revelations about her mind control, McAfee suicide, Kamala Harris stuff, and I think I'm even leaving out and forgetting some things. And, a lot to do with the end of people owning houses. Like that's, happening right now. The end of home ownership, real estate, stuff to do with the global reset is right there. So I want to start here with the Global Repatriation Council from the Falcon and Winter Soldier, which is just loaded with global reset symbolism. I just completed watching the show. And this is a commercial, like a fake commercial, for the Global Repatriation Council.
When half of us came back, it was time to rejoice and reunite. The Global Repatriation Council.
So what the Global Repatriation Council is, if you watch the last two movies of the Avengers, in the end of the Infinity Wars movie, Thanos snaps his fingers and wipes out half the universe's population. It's a, big eugenics moment. And then for 5 years, half the population of Earth is gone. And then they come back. And so this movie deals with the sort of New World Order stuff. In fact, the first episode, this is from Marvel's official site, the first episode is called The New World Order, right? And here's the shield, which has all this symbolic stuff around that. I'm not going to get too much into this because I don't do symbolism videos so much anymore because everything's like happening in real life. But this was quite prophetic, so I thought I would cover this. But the first episode's called New World Order, right? I said, well, that's something, right? They're not, they're not mincing words.
Knows that for many, it wasn't that easy. So much has changed. But we're here to help you find your way, helping you back into your homes and jobs.
They're helping. They're helping people get back into their homes. So what that's about, specifically for America, is that when half the population disappeared, they needed more slaves, more wage slaves. And so people immigrated from other countries to America, and those people took on the lives of people who disappeared for 5 years. And they started to live in their homes and all these things. And then all those people reappeared with the Endgames movie. And so now they're trying to ship out all these slaves, all these immigrants that they brought in, right? And that's the repatriation. And there's, a group of dissidents that want to get rid of that, and they have a slogan of one world, one people, and they want to get rid of all the, all the governments around the world.
Helping you navigate changes to society, laws, and borders. Helping you get back to the way things were. GRC, the Global Repatriation Council.
And so here's the big moment right here.
Repatriation Council. Reset. Restore. Rebuild.
Reset, like the global reset, right? So they're putting it out right here, the global reset. Global reset, restore, and rebuild. And again, the first episode's called New World Order. And then there's so much in the show. And this was being, this is a long-running Marvel universe that was created long before COVID, but even this show itself was filmed in 2019. It started in October 2019, and then all the way through December, most of it was filmed in Atlanta, Georgia, where Marvel has its big studios, and then some of it was filmed in the spring of 2020 when COVID hit, and they were in various locations, around the world and things like this. And so this was filmed before the whole COVID year completion, and this agenda was put in the film, and there's a lot of agenda here. I'm going to go through the narrative and just a lot of the woke agenda and so many different global reset things that are in this TV show. So I'm in the editing process of the video, and I often, insert some sort of a voiceover, especially after I've made all the initial clips and there's a theme that maybe I didn't fully understand when I started to make the video or when I was putting these things on the toolbar. But I wanted to start off here and then go back to this at the end of the video. I want to, put this into the introduction, this theme behind all of these clips and stories that you're going to see. And the whole idea of the, people awakening, right? So to start off with, no matter what species you're in, you have a system, whether you're an individual creature living in a solitary type of a situation, marking out its own territory, finding feeding grounds, or you're living a herd or a family type of culture or a hive, like something like a colony for insects and things. You have a system, like bees have a system and fish have a system, right? Like, turtles lay their, sea turtles come up on the shore and lay their eggs and on the beach and then, then these baby turtles walk into the ocean. That's their system, right? That's their system of parenting. And you have a system of how you are going to obtain your food and shelter and things, how you're going to survive, right? And people have more extensive systems. You understand this. But with animals, for example, you have domesticated animals, livestock, and pets that now are a part of a human system. The dog, is a part of a pack mentality. They live in packs, right? They are, for the most part, they used to be wolves, or, if they were foxes, it's something different. But wolves live in packs, and dogs have sort of a pack mentality, and you have a family. And so their pack mentality, their pack system identification, and your family identification sort of merge together. The same thing with herd animals, cows, and things like chickens or whatever, flock animals. And so you have a system in which it supports your life to whatever degree, right? You can't survive without this system of food gathering and shelter and communal activities. Now, for human beings, the system is much more extensive, and the system we currently have, for the most part, you don't know so much about where your food comes from, where your electricity comes from, where the clothes that you get, right? If you lived in a tribal situation or a village type situation where it's a localized system, where everything is done locally, your food is grown locally, your clothes are made locally, all these types of things. Your entertainment even is some kid who plays a violin or banjo or something, right? It's some, tribal type of a situation with drums or, didgeridoos or something, right? You have even local entertainment. Everything comes from your area, and pretty much everything about the things that support you, and you do a lot of it. You do a lot of the work, and you have a lot of the skills that make the system go and work. But that ended. That ended in, basically the early 1920s, 1900s, right? I mean, it was already starting to end when people started to live in cities, and then the cities became so big that people didn't really understand all the things that went into providing for them. Their food, their clothing, eventually their electricity, right? These things. Their, armies, their entertainment, all of it. It started to become less local. And then it went from, to cities, to states, to whole nations, and then global. Now we have a global system where you have food and products coming from other places in the world. And you don't know, if your phone's made in a sweatshop and the people who are making it are treated fairly and what really is in it and things like this. You're not privy to this information. And so you do a specialized skill and job, and you live in a neighborhood, and more people don't even know what's going on in their neighborhood. They don't know about their neighbors, all these things, right? And so people know less and less about the food they get, about the electricity and entertainment and all these things, and government that controls them and the global government and all the systems that are there to, manage your life, to help you get through your human life. And people have lost knowledge and not in touch with everything that's going on in their lives and their world. And so it's just blindly trusting the system. And you see that where, something recently was unveiled, a new thing that the government is pushing on people. And people are coming out and saying, I don't care what's in it, right? I don't care, whatever. Just, give it to me, right? And you have where there was a lack of consciousness. And then the internet came out. And even though the internet created more isolation and more people living in the cyber world and more people being detached from reality, it also was a vehicle to put out information. And people started to find out about the system that controls them and the negative side. Like, especially here in America, we have good material lives. We have a lot of comforts. We live way better than kings and emperors in the past live in terms of, hot water, fresh water pumped into our house, and food from all over the world showing up at our grocery stores, and, all these things, cars, vehicles, we can just travel anywhere, planes, and we can go all over the country, the availability of travel. I mean, things that, kings in the past, they would have to take ships for 3 months to cross the ocean to go from Europe to America or some of these other places, right? And now it can be done in a couple of hours, or at least, within a day. Like, you can fly, for 24-hour period, you can fly all the way across the world and things like this. And then externally, you have beautiful cities, beautiful neighborhoods, and all these, wonderful things, fine trimmed lawns and gardens and, places to go, zoos and museums. And you have all the beautiful, like, artifice, the external manifestation of your system. But what goes into doing it? Like, what goes into having all of this wealth and opulence all around us? Where's the money come from? How is everything managed, and, whatever it might be. And for the most part, people didn't care because they were happy. And as long as they were being provided for, it was like, all right, I don't need to know. But then the internet changed all that. And you had all these people sort of waking up to the idea that there was criminality, immorality in the hidden part of the system, like the engine part of the system, the bowels of the system that we don't, get to see, the guts of the system. We see the product, but we don't see what goes into it and how it is created and how it hurts all of us. And, some of the evil things that were done, oppression and all the negative things that are done to make the system go. And so you had people waking up to this. All of a sudden, they knew things about the system they didn't care about before, and it bothered people, especially if it had to do with a specific aspect of the person's makeup, their demographic, who they were psychologically. And so you had these, varying degrees of people waking up. And the way it would go is something like this. If you were like people like now the Cubies, people who follow Q, the problem is the so-called elite and the deep state, and these are liberals and Democrats, and if you get rid of them, you could fix this system. If you were a woken person who was a person of color, an African American, the problem is systemic racism and the fact that white people have all these privileges. And so if you sort of balance that out and you uplift the people of color and you take away some of the privileges and power of the white people, then the system can be fixed. If you're a vegan or a PETA type of person, it's the abuse of animals. It's the treatment of animals. Also, people who are, foodies or organic people would also sort of fall in this line. And if you started to treat nature better, you got rid of the various, factory farms and the way that people manipulate and use animals for food, or, use animals for experiments or whatever it might be. And also the spray of chemicals and GMO foods and things. This is a whole, bunch of different demographics and groups. And if you get rid of those things and you bring it back to something more natural and people treated animals better, then this problem would be solved, right? It's each person's specific ideology and the way they look at things. People who are Christians, it's the demonic and satanic aspect of the devil working through people in government and Hollywood and society. And so with those people were brought to Christianity and Jesus, then the problem would be solved, right? Each person has, or each group has a view of the problem, like the 5 blind men talking about an elephant, right? One feels its tail, one feels its trunk, one feels its ears, one feels its leg, one feels its body. And so they all have a different idea what an elephant is based in their limited perception. People in the truth community believes that there's a, sort of New World Order agenda, the Illuminati, or one group or another. Some people think it's the Zionists. Some people think it's the Jesuits. People think it's this group or that group. And if you get rid of those people and you put in people like yourself, and that's always the solution, people like yourself taking over the power of the government or the food industry or the culture or whatever it is, taking over Hollywood and making, decisions and rules and content and whatever it might be, food that reflects your worldview, then the evil problem of the system, the cancer in the system, would be removed and the system would be made whole. It would be a good system. People who are like feminists, it's the men are the problem, women being mistreated and abused and being oppressed. And if women are able to break the glass ceiling and take more of a control over the system, and also it has to do with the movies that you see now where they change everything, where there's more LGBT women and people of color in the lead role and white guys aren't the protagonists anymore, right? Changing all these things. And if you do that, you balance everything out and you get rid of the essential problem. People in the LGBTQ, all this idea of homophobia and them being ostracized and viewed as not normal. So when that is reversed, then society will be good again, right? Or it'll be, the problem, the cancer will be taken out and it'll be replaced by a better, more inclusive society. So they have all these various views that people have. People who understand the economy, it's the debt-based economy, and, it's the bankers, everyone has their view of the power structure and what needs to happen to make the system good and whole. And you have things like Trump, and you have all the left-wing people and the Trump haters and the news. Oh, if we get rid of Trump, everything could be made good again. But now, we have Biden, and the Republican people are like, oh, we got Biden, we got to get rid of Biden, and the Democrats. And, there's all these ways that people think, all right, this is the problem, and if we take over, there'll be a solution. But if you put all these things together, and I'm not even, scratching the surface of all the various ways that people view the problem and the solution, and it is, not comprehensive. Because if you look at all the various ways that people look at this, there is a systemic problem. There's the debt-based economic system. There's a disconnection between nature and God. There's the specialization of the human, the human workforce, where people aren't developed in a holistic and organic way to be everything they can be. Like you have a limited way of expressing your work and who you are as a person. And most of it's about working for a little bit of time, doing a specialized skill, and then living for the weekend and all these things. And so people think they're awoke or awakened, but they don't understand the problem, the complete problem, and they really don't have a clue about the solution. Most people, like for Trumpers, people are like, look at the election. Trumpers are like, well, Trump is going to make America great again, and so we just got to put him in there. And then they'll do all the rest, the QBs, all the people like that. But people who hated Trump said, all right, we got to get rid of Trump. We put Biden, and then we'll go back to sleep, and Biden will take care of everything. We'll just, trust him. And most people have that attitude. They see the problem, they're emotional about the problem, and then they just think, all right, we'll hand it over to this group of people that we trust who are like us, and they'll fix the problem. But you don't even understand the problem. You don't understand the comprehensive nature of our system that is, demonic because it's debt-based. It goes against the natural order of things where debt is wealth, right? And people are disconnected from God and nature, what makes them natural human beings, their soul and their soul's path. And we're going in the wrong direction collectively. and our society, which is unnatural and demonic and all these things, not in the sense of some religion, demonic in the sense that it goes against the will of God, the divine order of things, the divine laws. And so it's our whole system. I mean, it's across the board. You can find it everywhere. And our orientation to life, where too much emphasis is put on our happiness and pleasure, where that's the main pursuit of most people, and not anything to do with your duty, with your service to God, with your role in making the world a better place, and all these types of things that I talk about. Character development, connection to soul and God on a heart level, where it's an internal connection, internalizing yourself, where everything isn't going out into the world and extracting pleasure and stimulation, which is, a very low level of expression of any species, and particularly for humans. This is what I talk about with the heartfulness system, right? And internalizing your existence to some extent, going inside and connecting to God, and then, having your life be in communion with your soul and your soul's path, your ego and your personality and your, identity, forming a relationship, an internal relationship with God and your soul, and making decisions that are, congruent with all of these aspects of oneself, and the heart being the instrument of love. And so this is a complete transformation of the human experience and the system that would be manifested out of such people, because we're manifesting this current system internally. We have it inside of us, and we are collectively manifesting it externally. And so to have that, to have that type of population of saintly people, the system would look nothing like the one we have now. And we would all be more aware of the system in a holistic, natural way, where it would be, a complete awareness of all the aspects of the system, and divinizing it and making it be in order and in congruence with the divine laws and the will of God. And that's going to happen, but this old system has to be removed first, because all of us are dependent and addicted to the system and can't imagine life without it. That's the big problem. We can't let it go. We can't let this system go. And so you have all these people that are partially awakened, partially woke, who have a limited view of the problem and just want the system to be fixed and believe it can be fixed, because they don't want to face the reality that the whole system is, going in the wrong direction, and it's hurting all of us on every level, and what it would take for us to not have this system. See, that's the, I talked about this in another video, and this is the theme of this video, is that you can take down what you think is the problem, and you can take down the system as a whole, but there's no solution. What solution do you have? Do you have, does your group have an economy and a social system and a governmental system and a system of food and a system of energy and all these ways that, all these things that we're dependent on? Does your worldview and the people that are, thinking like you, does your demographic have a solution that could actually work? Like, people can, turn into a mob and take down a system. I'm not going to say this in the video, so it's going to be restated, because I already, made the original voiceover, and this is just an introduction I thought was necessary. But do you have a solution? Because you can take something down. It's easy to destroy something, but what are you going to put in its place? What's next, right? Like, what do you do on the other end when the system is taken down, or the part of the system you think is the problem? What do you put in its place that's going to be better, that's going to, solve the problem? And the heartfulness system has a solution for this, which I'll talk about more at the end of this video. But it's something for people to be aware of as I go through these various stories, is that you see the problem and you see that things have to change, but what's the solution? What can be put in its place after the problem, the cancer, is removed? Okay, so let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. So here are the end credits of the show after the show's over, and they have the breaking of the shield here. The shield has so much symbolic, there's so much symbolism surrounding the shield in the show. And there's lots of sort of subliminal stuff here. They're focused in on the one eye of Uncle Sam, and then there's all this woke stuff, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The stuff with Captain America, who is, now dead, and, being replaced by like a crazy guy, and then the Falcon and all that stuff, a lot of woke stuff. There's the one eye of Captain America, another one eye of Captain America. And there's just stuff with the White House being, sort of broke up, like apocalyptic type of imagery. There's a monkey that looks very similar to the 12 monkeys symbol, which I covered in a recent video. The stuff with the monkeys, Army of the 12 Monkeys and all that had to do with a virus and things, which I thought was interesting because it didn't play a part, as far as I could tell, in the show itself. There's the Statue of Liberty, everything with blood on it, and, just apocalyptic. New World Order army soldier. It's very similar to the paintings, those apocalyptic paintings in the Denver airport, which they've been talking about how Washington, D.C. seems to be a ghost town. I'll cover that maybe later in this video. But there's like, half a shield. I mean, there's all this stuff with the shield in the show itself. And, the collapse of America is very prevalent. The symbology in the whole Captain America stuff. But then this opening up to the Illuminati Eye and the GRC, Global Repatriation Council, the stuff with Global Reset, and it has to do with that. And I thought that was interesting. And then pointing at you with all this stuff like, everything being sort of broken and just falling apart, the collapsing system. It says rebuild, but it's, they got rid of the end of it and put L, which is the in Spanish, and turned it into rebel. This stuff with the drone, the Falcon has a drone, all these, drones of death that they have. Then you have this again, this sort of Statue of Liberty figure, and the eye explodes out, right? The eye gets burned out. A lot of Illuminati kind of stuff in this thing. Be associated with the global reset. And again, all apocalyptic, everything ripped down, everything falling apart. And then the Illuminati eye here again with the Falcon. Then again, and here's the shield dripping with blood. They turn the Captain America over to a crazy ex-soldier who ends up killing somebody. I'm going to give some like spoiler alerts. I don't know how many people haven't seen this or are not interested in seeing it yet, but I'm going to give a single eye of the Captain America. But the fall of America is very prevalent in this. And then there's just a lot of like unbelievable woke stuff, just really like off the charts woke things in this TV show, even for Marvel, because Marvel's going woke. Like that's their big thing, is to go woke. Again, here's the Illuminati eye, and it, why would that be there? The capstone of the pyramid, the eye and the capstone of the pyramid. And I don't cover things like that anymore because it's actually happening. I used to cover a lot about symbology and predictive programming and things in in TV shows and movies, but since things are going live right now and it's actually happened, then it's not as prevalent. Again, with the broken, the ripped Illuminati eye here. I mean, there's so much of that symbolism. This is the end of the show. This is the end credits to the show, and it's just here's the serum that's supposed to turn you into a super soldier and manipulate your genetics. There's serum. Don't take the serum. Serum leads to bad things. And so this is the serum that Captain America took, but other people, when they take it, they flip out. And this is the new crazy Captain America that ends up murdering somebody with the shield, and that gets caught on, on video and goes viral and all this stuff. He's kind of flipping out. And the Falcon was given the shield by Captain America at the end of Endgame, but he doesn't want to take on that mantle, so he gives the shield back to the government, and then there's a whole thing to do with that. He gives a long monologue at the end. It's just one of the most woke speeches ever. And there's the shield with a price tag. These are American dog tags, but it also could be a price tag with the flag, and just a ton of this stuff. So here you can see Libya, which is, that illegal and destructive war, a political war, and, New World Order war in Libya, regime change. But all these countries that are involved in that of course, Afghanistan and China and all these things that don't play a part in the show at all. And so if you know anything about these characters, the Falcon was the sidekick of Captain America, like the Robin of Captain America in the comic books. And the Winter Soldier is Captain America's childhood friend. He was born in Captain America was a World War II soldier who was frozen and then woken back up. And he was given this serum to turn him into a super soldier. And the Winter Soldier was one of his friends, Bucky something. He was his other sidekick when the comic book originally came out. And it was all this World War II sort of patriotic stuff. And Bucky was then taken over by Hydra, which is sort of like a Nazi-like organization. And he was put under mind control. He ends up fighting Captain America in the second installment of the Captain America movies and leading into the Avengers movies. And he's featured very prevalently because Captain America supports him, even though he's like a wanted fugitive. And Captain America gets, they're after him to arrest him and things like this. Bucky, the Winter Soldier in this TV show, is trying to get deprogrammed. He has all these programming words that, make him into an MK Ultra mind control soldier. And then there's all this woke stuff with the Falcon, who is, hesitant to become Captain America because of his race. He doesn't want to be there's just all this stuff to do with that. And there's the new Captain America who's like mentally ill. I could actually do a really long video on this and all the symbolism, but this stuff's happening right now. Like all the stuff that is, the symbology isn't as important because it's happened. We're like living it in real time. And so one of my friends on Facebook sent me this. Blackstone bets $6 billion on buying and renting homes. So Blackstone, which was interesting because I was sent this, I don't know, yesterday or the day before, and I didn't get a chance to cover it. But I had just covered, these are the 15 most influential Skull and Bones members. So I just covered this in my video about Anderson Cooper. And I covered this guy, Steven Schwartzman, who's worth $11 billion, and he created the hedge fund, the Blackstone Group. Schwartzman was recently tapped by President Donald Trump to chair his Strategic Policy Forum, which consists of 17 high-powered executives. And so this guy was now buying houses, and I talked about this in videos. I mean, many other people have covered the global reset and how they've been talking about how you won't own anything in 10 years. The World Economic Forum put out these predictions that everyone's going to be renting everything. Everything's going to be, no one's going to own anything. They're all going to be in these, Netflix-like contracts. So that was, where you would pay a monthly fee. That's, in terms of everything, in terms of the future of the economy, that's what's happening, right? And so there's all these articles about this. They're buying 17,000 houses. And there's also other big financial groups. So I've talked about this recently, that real estate is like going bonkers. This company is bidding like 20% higher than the asking price on houses. They're just gobbling up real estate, which means that the dollar has collapsed. Like the dollar is not worth anything, so they're putting their cash assets and their derivatives assets into something real and tangible, into hard assets. And there's no more hard asset than real estate. And so what they're doing is owning all these homes, and they're going to rent to people as everything falls apart. They're also, this might be the end of some of these, the cryptocurrency putting into hard assets. Everybody's cashing out. They realize that because of all these inflationary measures that have happened in terms of printing money for all these bailouts, and there's, going to be like $10 trillion of bailout money that's going to matriculate through the economy, and people who are going to be, getting gobs of that bailout money, billions of dollars of the bailout money, are all going to try to put it into hard assets in one way or another. And so this is where real estate is. There's a real estate boom because the dollar isn't worth anything. The dollar's probably worth a third of what it used to be worth. And that's going to come around. And when it comes around, there's going to be epic changes. Like to, have the situation where you no longer own anything. Like how are people going to accept that? And so there's a lot to do with that. I'll come back to all this. I got to get to all this other mind control stuff, because we have Britney Spears on the docket, right? So President JoJo Magoo had a press conference yesterday on gun violence, and he looked shaky. I wasn't going to cover it because of the subject matter, and, it's a little bit of a, taboo type of thing. But he ended up saying this.
The Second Amendment, from the day it was passed, limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon. Those who say the blood of the...
You couldn't buy a cannon, and only certain people could own guns back in the days of slavery, back in the days of serfdom and slavery. So he's talking about the Second Amendment here, which is probably not going to go well for him, right? But then he just unloads this sort of epic gaffe.
What type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon. Those who say the blood of the blood of patriots, and all the stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there never been, if you wanted to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons.
What do you do? Are you giving a recipe? He just kind of loses his train of thoughts here, right? I don't know what happened in his mind, but this was not, this is freaking people out, and it shouldn't because it's just JoJo melting down. But it's an epic gaffe. He's saying, forget about all these, things you're trying to buy. You need F-15s and nuclear bombs, right? What are you talking about, Magoo? Magoo does it again.
What's happened is that there never been, if you wanted to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. The point is that there's always been.
He pointed to his eye here, like when he said that, like he's pointing to his eye. He's always got this deliverance boy eyes.
And maybe some nuclear weapons. The point is that there's always been the ability to rationally limit the type of weapon that can be owned and who can own it.
And so I want to make it clear here, because I don't really want to cover this part because of it being controversial and things like this. So I'm going to just say this. Taking over the government and violence are not the answer. I always talk about how protests are bad. Protests never wield good results for the people who are protesting and all the rest of it. And taking over the government, you can do it. Like it's a possibility. But then what next, right? Because that's, people get fired up in a rebellion. And this also goes with the Winter Soldier. You had these like super soldiers who were, people who were, kind of woke, and they wanted to get rid of governments. They were, like I said, the slogan was one world, one people. And they were, creating havoc and trying to bring down the government, all these anarchists and all these people who are rebels. And you can take down the government. You can take down, like that's a possibility. But then what are you going to do? You have a $2 quadrillion solution because of the debt. So it's like, you taking over a company that just declared bankruptcy. It's like you're going in and invading Kmart, right? Like, why would you do that? Why would you try to take over something that's going to collapse and is collapsing? Why would you want to do that? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. If you look at the information, you're not going to fix it. It isn't that there's a leadership problem. You have a, system that's reached its expiration date. Like, it's like taking over, like a food company that had food stored and all the food is past its expiration date. The system is going to collapse, and it has nothing to do with, its divine will. It's something that there's a divine plan here. The Kali Yuga's over, and the system is in its collapsing phase. Taking over a system that's with crushing debt, right? That has overwhelmingly crushing debt, soul-crushing debt, that can't be, ever fixed, right? You can't make this system whole. You can't make this system work. And there's a new system coming, and there's like a new human being coming, a more evolved human being. I talk about this in terms of the heartfulness meditation, that there's a consciousness shift, an awakening on a spiritual level, and a deepening of people's relationship with God. And that's, also in the works. That's, something has to die, and then something else is born from that. So all this chaos is just a sign of the collapsing system. But in terms of taking over the system, it's not like he's saying you need nuclear weapons. Like, why would you need nuclear weapons? You're going to nuke your own country? Like, I mean, is that what, like, it's going to take in his mind in terms of a rebellion? Because what it's going to take is, and again, I'm not suggesting this. I'm not saying it should be done. And all these Trumpers, I got some comments from people, all these people still coming in, Trumpers trickling in, Cubies, that Trump is the real president. He's the, resident, the silent P, like, like Psaki. He's a resident president. He's not really the president, and Trump's the real president, but Trump's, falling apart Trump's just gone, and he's just, in shambles after the debacle. Trump did a lot of stupid things post the election. He did a lot of stupid things throughout, and he was a part of this thing. Steven Schwartzman was tapped by Trump. Trump had a number of skull and bonesers in his presidency. Of course, going back to Captain America and the Red Skull, right? The Red Skull is this, his chief villain in the first movie. But in terms of taking over the government, a rebellion, the big hump is whether the military will turn and fire on American people. And I was talking to my brother about this, and when he came back from Vietnam, he shared a story with me, which I'm not going to talk about, where soldiers disobeyed orders to squash protests. That was something that happened in the 60s because, soldiers were sort of wised up to what was going on and how they were being controlled by the powers that be. So if it came down to some sort of rebellion, the rebellion would, and again, I'm not suggesting it won't work, and it'll just be, it'll just switch hands at who's responsible for the mess. Again, what's next? Okay, you take over the government, then what are you going to do after that? You don't have a plan because you don't even know the full nature of the debt and the economic problems and the collapsing system. But if there was a rebellion, it would be about whether the soldiers, American soldiers, were going to fire on the American people. That's what it would come down to. And I don't want to see it because that'll just, expedite the problem. Right now, it'll expedite the collapse if there was some sort of takeover. But anyways, Magoo is just babbling about.
Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there never been, if you want to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons.
What are you doing, Magoo?
And of course, a bottle of cologne. Oh, no!
What are you doing, Magoo?
Real He-Man aroma. Yeah. The ladies would really get a bang out of it.
Magoo likes the ladies.
Yes, but it's more your type, Armand. Look at him go. He can hardly wait to try it out.
It's safe. I think that's a Magoo everywhere.
And after all my years of devoted patronage, this place has gone to the bow wows.
It's gone to the bow wows. Magoo. Okay, so I have to switch toolbars. This is why this story is coming earlier on than it normally would. I'm going back to another browser. T-Pain suffered depression after Usher's criticism of his auto-tune tracks. T-Pain, who was, famous for auto-tuning, and he got criticized apparently by Usher, and everybody's like, victimized and bullied, and, he was depressed. T-Pain was depressed. You know what else? T-Pain was wanting to get into the Illuminati. So this is what he had to say about the Illuminati, T-Pain. If there's an Illuminati, boy, I'm looking for them. I'm telling you, boy, I'm trying to get in it. I would be way richer than I am right now. T-Pain. T-Pain wants to get into the Illuminati. So in a day of epic stories, Vice President Harris to visit U.S.-Mexico border this week. So, she is so screwed. Like, Biden screwed her by making her in charge of this debacle. And she's had time and, the ability to visit the border, but has avoided it, even though everybody says you need to go do this. And she knows when she goes there, it's going to be bad. But she delayed it as much as possible. And now she's going. We'll return and cover this, but I want to get to the Britney stuff. So I'll come back and talk about this when she actually goes to the border. Britney Spears asked judge to end abusive conservatorship. The singer at the center of the Free Britney movement made horrific allegations of abuse and says she sustained at the hands of her family and lawyers. Britney Spears to court, I feel ganged up on, bullied, and left out and alone. The singer says she has been traumatized by the conservatorship and has refrained from speaking publicly. She felt no one would believe her. Jamie Spears allegedly controlled Britney's whole life, even her cabinet colors. And so he chose her cabinet colors in her house. And among other things, 5 alarming claims from Britney Spears' testimony included forced IUDs. So she wanted to have another baby, and she says that she was forced to have an IUD so that she couldn't get pregnant. I mean, this is, kind of staggering stuff. I think she's worth like $220 million. So that's what's a part of this, a Disney kid. And then she says she was forced to take lithium. It's a strong drug. You can go mentally impaired if you stay on it longer than 5 months. I feel drunk. I couldn't even have a conversation with my mom or dad about anything. They had me with 6 different nurses. 6 is a interesting number. She linked her forced work to sex trafficking. The control he had to hurt his own daughter, he loved it. I worked 7 days a week. It was like sex trafficking. I didn't have a credit card, cash, or my passport. She wants to sue her family. She feels silenced from speaking about her situation. Well, this is all stuff that the Free Britney people must be going nuts about. This is on page 6. Andy Cohen praises Britney Spears. Britney Spears wants a baby, but she has a conservatorship, forces to take birth control, and won't allow her to get married. Justin Timberlake is supporting her. You're toxic, Britney Spears, in dramatic plea for freedom from bullying and abusive father. And the whole conservatorship is interesting. Let's go to Britney land. So this is her Instagram page, and this is her most recent post where she's doing that. And today is the day she breaks her silence, praying for you, Britney. I think I speak for most when I say, love you, Britney. We hope you are okay and happy. You deserve nothing less. Go speak, Britney, loud and clear today. The whole world supports and loves you. Love, Botany. I'm so proud of you speaking your truth, finally. Thanks for sharing. You are amazing. We love you, Queen. Maybe a dress? Today she speaks. Guys, we love you, Britney. Going back to the beginning of this video and the Winter Soldier being under mind control, and it's very prevalent in the Marvel Universe. In the first Avengers movie, there was mind control with the character Hawkeye. And then in the second Avengers movie, all the Avengers get put under mind control except for Hawkeye, who said, I already did that, right? I already did mind control. He uses the phrase mind control. And so it's very prevalent in the Marvel franchise. The Scarlet Witch, who later becomes one of the heroes, puts the Avengers under mind control. And so you have that second story where that guy Schwartzman, who was a Skull and Bones member, and I just documented this. I mean, I've documented this years and years ago, that the Skull and Bones, there's the Hebrew tattoo, like a barcode on the back of Britney's head, and there's her snake. You know, she's got these snake outfits that she puts on, and she talked about wearing a snake, having a live snake on one of the award shows in this, post. But if you think about mind control being something that was created by the CIA came out and admitted that they did mind control experiments on Americans, something that President Clinton admitted to. And so they have, there's a long history of mind control and the U.S. government and the intelligence community. And it's all linked together. Yale University, all these presidents coming out of Yale, Skull and Bones, all these powerful people coming out of Skull and Bones. And it seems like every president has a Skull and Bones member somewhere in their cabinet. I think Trump had 2 of them. Obama had one. Austin Goolsbee. And so, or the president himself. So there's some relationship there with this, with these organizations, and Yale creating the CIA and the Skull and Bones creating the CIA, and Disney owning Marvel, and Disney being involved with Britney Spears being a Disney kid, and all these things tying together. And this stuff never came out. Like, she's been fighting this conservatorship for a while, and everybody's covering it today. They're all covering it like the guy's a villain. I mean, that's the take, but why didn't they take a stand earlier on? Her father being the villain. Even like the New York Times and these mainstream media organizations are covering it. And it used to be, oh, wow, these crazy Britney fans were just, free Britney movement, and Britney is acting crazy. But if you put somebody on drugs, and she's all messed up anyway. She's always been weird, messed up, Disney kid, whatever, mind control stuff. And then they drugged her up and say, well, look how crazy she is. But if you put her on psychological medications, if you put anybody on psychological medications, they're going to have issues, especially heavy-duty ones. There's always side effects. And, there are people who can't function without some sort of medication. And they're low functioning with it, but they can't function at all without it. And some people, it's maybe a positive, but for many people, they're not, right? And so for some people, they work in the beginning. I mean, I dealt with this in terms of clients I had, and you could see the difference between when they were medicated and when they weren't. And some people, they need something, they just can't function. But maybe it's a dietary thing, who knows what it is. But in terms of being placed on a psychiatric hold, and I've talked about this for years, people can be placed on a psychiatric hold and go to a psychiatric hospital, and then that freaks them out, and then they're put on medication, and they could be kept there the rest of their life because the medication and their confinement will make them crazy, right? And so if Britney Spears was made more crazy by the conservatorship itself, and then they bring her back into court and say, look at her, she's a mess, and you get some psychiatrist to sign off on it. I mean, people can be bought and sold. And so if they can do that to a high-profile person like Britney, then who couldn't they do that to? I mean, to normal folk, to people who are, average people, they can do this same thing to them. And we'll see if she wins this case, but she hasn't been able to get married. She hasn't been able to have kids. She has, had her life dictated to her all of these years by her family, parents who put her into, especially her dad, into being a child star for financial benefit. And her kids don't like him, and her sister doesn't like her dad. I mean, everyone around this says he's a bad guy. And you have all these, Britney conspiracy theorists. I mean, the whole Britney truthers. It's a whole, going back to what I was saying in the early part of this video, everything in our society is a mess. It's more than just one problem. It's more than what, your personal opinion is of the problem or your demographic's opinion of the problem is and how to fix it, because it's a bad system. It's a system that takes people away from being the best they can be. It takes people in a direction of entitlement, of materialism, of selfishness, of greed, all the negatives, hatred and envy. I mean, all the negative things that people can exude or become internally, it makes people worse. And that's the worst thing to say about the system, that people aren't getting better, they're getting worse. And, therefore, the system has to go. And so most people don't have a solution for this. This isn't my solution, by the way, but this is the solution that I've adopted from the Heartfulness meditation. So I became a practitioner of heartfulness in 1993, and within a month or two, I read the book Reality at Dawn by the second master of the system, Babaji, which is an epic book. You can find it. You can find an online version if you search Sahaj Marg. Sahaj Marg means the natural path, and Reality at Dawn. There's a PDF of the book, and it talks about all the problems of humanity, that humanity is in crisis right now. And Babaji later goes on to expand in this in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, channeled messages that he gave to this French woman that are just, wonderfully filled with energy and insight, and they're prophetic, all these things. But he talked about this in 1956. Humanity was in crisis. We were going in the wrong direction, and we were in the position of destroying the world or being completely wiped out. I mean, all these things. I mean, these aren't specific things that he says in the book, but this is stuff that I've gathered from all these various resources. And he said in Whispers from the Brighter World that this is an experiment, that the human beings on this planet are experimental. And, there was different versions of human beings in the past, but now the most recent ones are, prone to a lot of negative tendencies, and there needs to be an intervention. What he said in this book, Reality at Dawn, that there was going to be a shift, a major change and overhaul of the planet Earth on a spiritual level, but also material level, and the new civilization, that with all civilizations in the future, we're going to have spirituality as their base. They were going to have spiritual. They're going to be built on an internal connection to God, that each person and the civilization itself would be in communion and connected to God, and would base their structure on, the divine system, and God would guide them in the kind of civilization that needed to be there. And he also said the phrase that the new civilization would be built on the bones and ashes of the old civilization. Now, I read this in 1993, and I'd worked in, I started working in the field of psychology and human services, and I was working in a treatment center with kids who had been sexually abused and who had acted out sexually. So it was a really, bad, treatment center, prison level, institutionalized system. All the kids were on psychological meds, and there was a waiting list, and I could see that there was so many messed up kids, so many messed up people, really messed up people. And I'd been around, I'd seen some things in the world, and I'd never really bought into the American system. I was 29 at the time, and I, was like, well, that sounds about right. I'm reading this book, Reality at Dawn, and I had experienced the transmission and cleaning, and it had such a profound effect on me, and it reconnected me to God. I had, been a religious person when I was young, and then I got into drugs when I was about 14. I started smoking pot and partying. I didn't think about God for a number of years. And then I started to have a renewed interest when I was around 27, 28. And I did some various, some different little classes. And I took some yoga classes and things like this. But not really just, dabbling. And then when I did the Heartfulness System, it was such a profound, the experience I had right off the bat, it was, to me, the solution of my life. And I thought it would benefit everyone as well. And so when I read this, and I knew that the world was going in a negative direction, and being sort of an outsider, somebody who was an introvert and dyslexic and really just never got with the whole American dream thing and just, I don't know, the world in general, and seeing some negative things. Of course, I didn't know nearly as much as I know now, right? The things I'm covering now. But I could see it, and I said, yeah, that makes sense. That the world that we now live in will have to collapse at some point. And then a new world, not just a new world, but a new civilization will have to emerge with people being more saintly, being connected to God on a deep level. As I read through the literature, I understood what he was talking about was a society full of saints, where people would have a deep, profound relationship with God, and they would, every decision that they made, they would make it with God and their soul's path and their soul, connecting through their hearts. And it would be a completely different world. The world that we would manifest would be completely different. And then I went on and got married and had a master's degree in counseling, and all the things I went through with my ex, who was a childhood abuse survivor, all these things, and all the things I saw in the world. And then, I started doing research on this stuff. And the Whispers of the Brighter World messages came out, and I went deeper into the literature and the philosophy of the Heartfulness System. And as I started to understand it, as I understand it now, that the second master of the Heartfulness System, Babaji, who was a higher developed soul, even in a previous life, he was Patanjali, who was the father of yoga, the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga. And he had this incredible spiritual life where he just turned himself over to God. And it was a planned thing, but also it was something that was an accomplishment. And he had this spiritual master, Lalaji, the first master of the Heartfulness System, who took him through all these spiritual phases, and he intercommuned with all these higher developed spiritual beings and souls, famous people to some extent, when they were incarnate, some of them. And they all praised Lalaji and Babaji for this accomplishment. And he was given these instructions by this group coming from the divine source to remake the planet Earth through spiritual means, right, where he would go into a deep spiritual state, and he'd be deeply connected to God. He would be in the source with God in the center. And there's this, power. He had all his power centers open, and he would focus his will, and the instructions he was being given from his spiritual master and these higher developed souls was to, remake this planet. And it involved the, ending of our demonic current civilization and social system and all the things that we see in front of us, and then raising up people to a high level through the transmission and cleaning process that are given in the Heartfulness System. And so, this is what I believe. I know that many of you aren't going to believe this, or at least you're not going to know it. Like you're going to say, yeah, like I did so many years ago when I read about it. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. I'll give it a whirl. I got nothing to lose. And so after doing this for now, I think, 27 years, whatever it is, right? 28 years, I think I'm going on this August. I'm completely convinced of this. Back in 1993, yeah, not so much. There wasn't so much evidence of this. And it didn't say when. But then these Whispers of the Brighter World messages came out with these prophecies. And there's a major event he's saying is going to happen in between 25 and 26, And there's going to be a reshaping of the physical world and, genetic mutation to help with the spiritual transformation. To go along with the spiritual transformation, there needs to be a genetic transformation. Human beings have to be different themselves. And there's going to be less anger and hatred. Most of these negative components are going to be removed from the human condition, and people are going to be more service-oriented and more loving and, like you are on your best day and your best spiritual day. That'll be every day. Like when you're at your, your best, where you're reflecting out, where you're emanating out the essence of your soul and your spiritual essence and things like this. And so there's going to be this evolution of the consciousness of the human condition, a higher level of spiritual manifestation, and that's going to reflect in our material world. But before that can happen, this old world, a system that we're all dependent on and addicted to, and during that time, my family and I had bought a homestead, and I learned to milk a cow, and my kids learned to milk cows, all these things. And to do things, to live outside of the mainstream system. And I realized how dependent I was, how dependent all of us are on the mainstream system. Because now I knew a little bit about food production, and I could see how dependent I was, and all of us are, not just for food, but everything, and how addicted people are to the mainstream system, which is bad for us. So it's a system that we can't, even come up with an idea what we would do without it, right? I mean, this is the problem. This is the problem everybody has, because all of us want the system to continue. We can't imagine living without it. All the comforts and privileges and things we're used to. And so that's the struggle everyone's having. And we look at the ending of the system as being something evil, or people look at it as demonic and something fearful. And it is, but something beautiful as well, because it's the ending of something bad, an abusive relationship, an abusive system, a demonic system, and the birth of something new and better. But there's going to be growing pains, and the growing pains is going to be a tough transitional process. But the difference between me and what I present here, most people, I've accepted, even though I don't want it on a, egotistical level, on a, especially being an older person. I'm not looking forward to the collapse. I don't, I mean, I like the apocalypse, but, the post-apocalypse, that's not as fun, right? This is fun, but what happens afterwards, the aftermath, is not as fun. But I've reconciled it. I understand it, right? I understand, okay, things are going to get bad because, the system then, it's not bad. It's just, we don't have a solution. Like I was saying in the beginning, nobody has a real solution. Nobody really thinks about how to create a better system. Everyone sees the problem with our current system, and they, see some small part of the problem, and they think, all right, getting rid of that problem will fix the system. Like that problem is a cancer, you remove the cancer, and the system will, be good and function, but it's not that. The whole system's a cancer, and it has to be removed. And, we have to adapt and create a new system that's completely different than everything that we know and have been indoctrinated with, and all the things that we're addicted to and accustomed to. And so that's the challenge. The challenge is creating a new system, and it starts with connecting to God on a deep level and having God show you what a proper system should be, because it's so foreign to everybody. So I'm going to end this thing here. I want to talk about this more in future videos, but there is a solution, and the solution starts with people adapting a more spiritual way of being and connecting to God at a deeper level. Of course, the heartfulness system being at the center of that, because that's the system given for this problem. It's the solution to the problem of humanity right now, and it will be in the future. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.